I have a pretty important message for people that are in my generation and older, and it is pertinent to our survival. And I believe that over time, we can collectively work towards a model that will not only help us endure all what's going to happen with climate change, but also to replenish the environment around us. And so we were born into a world where we are perpetually in this cycle, right? Of working and then getting money, raising a family. And there's nothing wrong with that model. It's just that, unfortunately, the model is being pointed in the wrong direction. It's being pointed in the direction of collective self-destruction. And we can dig down pretty far, and in the core of it, really what's happening is whoever is pushing money, dark money especially, they're just making a deal with the devil. And this is what I have learned about deals with the devil. Okay, at first you win. At first you always win, but in the end you always lose. Whereas with a deal with God, okay, you have to learn. And so at first you lose, and it seems hard, it seems insurmountable. But God gave us one thing that makes it surmountable, and that is faith. And I believe that whereas with the devil, you win and then you lose, with God, at the beginning you lose, but in the end you always win. And that is really what's happening, is that the people who have hordes of wealth have conditioned all our minds through all the hierarchy of systems that we ought to live a certain way. And like I have iterated before, that certain way of living is destroying the planet. Like, come on, okay? And I know there's billions of people on this planet, and it seems like it's impossible to change. But look at me, I'm just an undergraduate student. I don't have much wealth, but I know that through hard work, and especially with working with others, we can create our own micro-society, our own microculture. And from there, once we can find balance in that, once we can find peace in that, peace knowing that every day when we wake up, we have chores around the farm to take care of. And so long as we keep that going, and so long as we meditate or fill our time with hobbies that inspire and drive us, we can live a very peaceful life. But that peace has been ripped away from our souls in exchange for what? In exchange for money. But when you're born into a world where things seem like they're okay, you're just going to keep perpetuating it. Like, it's unthinkable almost to go off the trail, right? And what we need to do is create a center point that we can all agree upon, and something that is so fundamental that it is beyond anything. And I think that center point ought to be God. And when your center point is God, really interesting things happen. And in the book I wrote, that's what I did. I held the center point as God, as some unknown that brought me to the present. And like I was talking about earlier, in the beginning, when you make a deal with God, you lose, but in the end, you always win. Right now, though, we're making deals with the devil, so we win at first, but then we always lose in the end with that deal. And so this is my plan over the next 3 to 5 years, is to begin amassing wealth and then gradually start shifting away towards a self-sustaining model. Now, imagine if you were to wake up tomorrow and suddenly, even if you had the money, you just suddenly switch to a new lifestyle. I mean, you can do it, but it just seems kind of just rough. And people do that. But me, myself, I don't like sudden change that much. I mean, I'm accustomed to things being consistent. But a way to hijack that is through gradualism, by very gradually working towards your new vision. And so what year one might look like is getting the resources needed. Year two will then be pertinent towards working towards getting those resources and that wealth to build the vision, a homestead, which is self-sustaining. And in my opinion, I would like it technologically inclined in a way that it is self-sustaining and not just renewable, not just green renewable, but green replenishing. Because what we actually need is, by 2025, our net carbon budget has to be around zero. So the amount of CO2 we're releasing is equal to the amount of CO2 being absorbed. But that's unrealistic. As a matter of fact, the amount of pollution is increasing worldwide, and there's still so much plastic around. And oh man, the world we live in just feels like plastic. And of course, that's relative to my perspective, and my perspective comes from a Western perspective that grew up in a very, very materialistic society. And what's deceptive about a materialist society is that if you never question what's behind your eyelids, what's in front of you then begins to seem like the truth. And what's in front of you can be changed. It can be manipulated and altered, like what we were just talking about. But we were talking about it in a way that was beneficial. Unfortunately, it's been bended the other way. It's been bended towards exploiting our existence so that the very few at the top can hoard all this wealth. And in my opinion, they're complete cowards and they're fools, because they're making a deal with the devil, and everything is impermanent. And so everything that they amassed will eventually go away once they're dead. They'll move on to another existence, and they leave behind a chaotic mess. So there's a deep illusion going on, the illusion that we can change through our government. That's bullshit. I'm just going to put it out there. We are not going to change the world through our government. That's just plain and simple. Government is big, slow, lots of red tape, bureaucratic. And whenever a Democratic candidate comes up and changes something, the Republicans come through and take it back, and the other way around. And so you have this fight, this struggle where nothing's actually changing enough. And if we look back at history, this has happened before, back when Rome was a republic. There was a fight, and the fight was between different Roman generals who wanted power. It was the first and second triumvirates. Eventually, Julius Caesar stepped on board, and in a very cunning way was able to seize power. And one of his reasons for that was because nothing was being done in the Senate. The Senate was just gridlocked, it was fixed. And if we look over the past 100 years, there have been some periods where there has been some good movement, but in general, no. It's the further we're progressing towards the present or into the near future, right? It just seems like not enough is being done. And so they want us to believe that change is possible through our government. It is possible, but that's not saying much. It's not saying much about how long that might take. So this is my proposition. Let the government do its thing. Let the people vote. Let the people drink and wine, do whatever they want. Doesn't matter. It's down to us, those who believe that we can actually change things. We have to come together as a central point, and from there build and influence. We influence others through our example. Because we could talk words all day long, but if we're not actually changing anything, well, who's going to listen to you? And so as a group, once we become a group, and we live a much, much more peaceful life. It's not so cyclical and moving towards self-destruction. It's moving towards the enlightenment of one's soul. So we go with this plan. Others around us take note, and others around us, in my age group, suicide is one of the leading causes of death. And so there are lots of desperate people out there. And so through our example, we prove that, hey, you know what? At one point, we thought everything sucked. We thought life sucked. I myself went through a horrible period. But you know what? That doesn't mean I could just give up, especially while there's others around me that are still suffering. And there are some that have suffered far more than I have. So this is really what I believe, is that through our example, we can change others. And we might not change others fast, but very gradually. It's like a network where, like we talk about that center point, right? We change those around us. And then the ones around us take note, and then the ones around those nodes take note, and you keep expanding. Now, there is danger in this, right? Because unfortunately, the government, through its bureaucracy, can find some way to stop this. And so we really have to abide the law as much as we can, I know Osho, he went out, this was back in the 20th century. He went out to Eastern Oregon, and he started this amazing commune. It had a dam, it had everything they needed to survive. But they didn't register with the federal government. So the feds came in and just took them out. Plus there was talk of just like weird sexual exploitation. And so I don't want any of that. If weird stuff does happen though, due to human nature, I believe those people should heal. And I'm not going to deny anyone, neither should anyone in the group deny another. We should always believe that one has the seed of change. So we heal ourselves, we heal others, we expand outwards. By example, we change. And I believe that that is the most efficient way. If we're going to vote, if we're going to play the game of Democrat and Republican to get something like the Green New Deal through, it's going to take way too long. And this is the hard, cold truth, is that we ran out of time. But that doesn't mean it's all over. It just means that now we have to make time. We have to make time. Thank God we have science. With science, it'll be possible to change the environment around us. And I, in my heart, am a scientist. But I'm also a man of faith. So I have faith that in proper science, in proper study, we can find a way to change what's around us. And even if you're not scientifically inclined, like maybe that just doesn't interest you. And that doesn't make you dumb. It just means you're not interested in it. If that's the case, then on the homestead, in the group, you can find whatever you want to do. Just help us keep the homestead alive. Help us heal others. So that was the first thing I wanted to talk about. And this kind of leads into the second thing. The second thing talks about the virtual side of things. And with blockchain emerging, it is inevitable that our currency is going to turn into some cryptographic form. The current cryptography out there uses very simple ideas that are unfortunately susceptible to quantum computers, specifically Shor's algorithm. This means that if the government wants to, they can go through and crack your banking data, all your personal data, because there are public keys that select few individuals have. And without doubt, the government found some way to have access to that. And Edward Snowden proved these things to us, that they have a computer that can just decrypt information upon command. It can break into a cell phone upon command. The one which broke into the cell phone is called Pegasus. And there's an interesting 60 Minutes about that. But aside from the point, right? The main point is hyperencryption. So hyperencryption, for the sake of this video and it's the publicity thereof, I will not go too far into the details. However, I have tested it in Java, which is a high-level programming language. Unfortunately, it's slow, but it gets the job done. So I made the prototype in Java, and it works. It runs. It just needs now more finesse. It needs to be optimized. And so for the past half year, I've been doing lots and lots of reading, lots of studying on a language called Rust. If you're a coder, I recommend you learn it if you haven't already. But what this will allow us to do is this will allow our current networks to run a hyper-encrypted system that not even a quantum computer can break into. Now, theoretically speaking, it's always possible. Something's always possible. So in this case, it's always possible to break in to the system. But the hyper-encryption protocol I am creating cannot be found, at least the key pairs cannot be found through ordinary means. They are living, breathing entities in a sense. I imagine them metaphorically, and then I began to implement them. And so earlier I was talking about how we should just dump, or we shouldn't rely upon our government, right? Well, I believe that through a hyper-encrypted network, kind of like a VPN, we can form nodes. So imagine this homestead idea again, right? In this homestead, we have a central node, right, that we defined earlier. Now we can have a computer that acts as a central node, that we all put trust into it. We all have faith that our information is secure there, and it can only be read by us. And even me, if I was trying to access your data, and you happen to also be in my group, I can only access your data if there's mutual permission. And so I'm trying to make a network that helps build human relationships through trust. It's going to force trust. And some people might critique this, that it might be too slow or whatever. Well, with the current encryption, if you're going to build a society, or at least a part of society, if you have a plastic wall, once quantum computers come around, that plastic wall will be destroyed. So what I'm creating is kind of like a wall, but it's like a shape-shifting wall. It's moving, dynamic, and it's tougher than plastic. A quantum computer most likely cannot ever break into it. But like I said earlier, anything's possible, right? So in this network, this group, it's like an iron curtain. Nothing can get in. It's only we can possibly interact with each other. And it's possible because it depends upon our trust. Now, there are other homesteads, let's say, and they also have their own little iron curtain. And then you have groups of these, and they mutually trust each other. And it's there that I believe that not only through the expansion of this self-sustaining homestead model, but also through this cryptographic virtual universe, we can devise plans and actions without the government ever having any clue. And I say this without fear over this public line, because there's so much information going through Facebook servers that it is extremely unlikely that a human will ever lay eyes upon this that belongs to Facebook. And even if they do, they are underpaid and they're just being exploited. Corporations exploit people. That's at least many of them do. In the model that I want, is yes, you have this network and then you have your homestead model. I want everyone there to point their vectors, to point where they want to go into a direction that will help amass momentum and money, because we still will need money to interact with society. And so through our own businesses, we can help influence what's around us. And this is going to take a lot of work, but together it's possible. Singularly, it's possible, but a human lifespan is so short that it's unlikely. But some people have, and they are extraordinary people. Look at Elon Musk, Warren Buffett, Bill Gates. You know, they all started off small, but they were persistent, right? And so we have to stop believing that we have to live a certain way. We have to stop believing that tomorrow the supermarkets will be filled. There is no guarantee that society will continue. And as climate change pressures build, we're going to have to leave society. They're going to tell you to the very end on the news that, oh, things are heating up, but things are okay. Oh, a little bit of rioting. Oh, a store doesn't have anything. But that's a big deal because everything is so interconnected that one small change in the network will lead to another. And causality is so complex that the human brain, if it were trying to consider all causes, it would get lost, right? We need supercomputers to model, but it's never precise. So in summary, we talked about how the plan is to move towards self-sustainability. And through that self-sustaining model, to influence others. And with that, to use the hyper-encryption protocol I am devising to protect our information and our motives, which, by the way, are pure with light. They cannot be dark. If they are dark, then we made a deal with the devil. And as I said before, you make a deal with the devil, you win at first, but you always lose in the end. So we can't do that. We have to understand that it's going to be difficult. There are going to be challenges. But in the end, I really believe that we can truly do it. But thank you for listening.